Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore, and it is time for another Tasting Tuesday. Today we are going to Texas, and we're going to learn a little about the yellow rose of Texas and about the whiskey yellow rose. And I'm going to talk about the myth, legend, and also talk about what actually may have happened in this story of the yellow rose. But I'm also going to do a tasting of this whiskey as well. And this whiskey came to me in the most interesting of ways. I was looking through my Instagram feed and somebody had posted a picture of a whiskey called the Yellow Rose of Texas. And I had remembered my interview with Nico Martini, who wrote the Texas whiskey book, about how there were outside distilleries that were using the name Texas and using a flag, or even some of the in-state ones were misrepresenting what was actually in the bottle. And so I posted that, and Michael Langan, the distiller at Yellow Rose, reached out to me and said, "Where did you find that bottle?" And it wasn't my picture. Come to find out, it was somebody in Japan who had posted it, and I forwarded this picture. And so we got into a little discussion about that, and he said, "Would you like to try our whiskeys? Have you tried our whiskeys?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And I had actually planned on going there in March of 2020 when I was traveling between Balcones and was headed down to the New Orleans Whiskey Bourbon Festival. That didn't end up working out, unfortunately. And had I known they were going to cancel the festival, I would have stopped by Yellow Rose. But that said, he sent me 2 bottles to try. I love these bottles. They're absolutely beautiful. I see them in the store and I go, yes, very nice presentation on these. So we're going to find out what these taste like on the inside. But first, let's jump into the history of the Yellow Rose of Texas. Probably something you've heard either through the song, or perhaps you've just, whenever you hear about Texas, it's one of those. You have Remember the Alamo and you have the Yellow Rose. And the Yellow Rose story actually happened not long after the Alamo. This was during the Texas Revolution, and what happened was pretty much Sam Houston was on the run with his volunteer force, and Santa Anna had control of his Mexican forces, and they were looking like they were in pretty solid position. And then, as the legend goes, Colonel James Morgan, who was a North Carolina merchant, had come down to Texas and then joined in the fight. And while he was off in the fight, his indentured servant, who was a woman of mixed race, black and white, she was a housekeeper, I guess, was what she was doing for him, was captured by Santa Anna, and he was smitten with her. And as the legend goes, she knew that Sam Houston was in the area, and so she decided to keep Santa Anna occupied in the tent while Sam Houston's forces came in and surprised the Mexican army. And in 18 minutes, they had basically won the Battle of San Jacinto, and that was the end. Pretty much, Santa Anna ducked tail and went back to Mexico. In fact, the story was that he escaped camp by dressing as a private and escaping unnoticed. I think they said they captured, and then he was captured, actually, dressed as a private. So that's the way the legend goes. I did some further research into it to find out what the real story is. It's a little different, and we'll get to that right after I do the tasting here. So 2 different whiskeys. Yellow Rose is in Houston, which is Harris County, and so that's where this name Harris County comes from on this bottle. And this is pot distilled. You'll find that Texas whiskeys are mostly pot distilled. As the industry grows, there will likely be more column stills coming along. But this is pot distilled, going to be short aged. If you think about Houston and those temperature swings down there and how hot it can get and humid, this is going to age a lot differently than something that is coming from, say, Dallas, or maybe coming from even Waco. So, all right, so we're going to go in and jump into this tasting first. And what this is it is made of 3 different grains: yellow corn, all locally sourced, yellow corn, which once we get into this one, you're going to find out what the character of that yellow corn is, because this one's 100% yellow corn. But this one is, it's yellow corn, I'm not sure of the mash bill, Elbin rye, and San Jacinto malted barley. So it fits right in with our story of the yellow rose. And let's see, so aged 30 months, and trying to think what else. I think that's mainly, that covers it for you. But so 2.5 years, as far as I know, aged in standard size 53 gallon new white oak barrels. And on the nose on this one, you get a nice, sweet, maybe it's a caramel vanilla kind of thing. Last night I was getting mint and chocolate out of this. And then there's a little herbal character to it. And that's what we're going to find when we get to this other whiskey. I think from that corn, it brings a interesting herbal note. And I was trying to put my finger on what that herbal note was, what I could relate it to. And I started going through my spice cabinet, because it's not what we think of like with the rye kind of a spice or herbliness. It's actually more like, and this isn't exactly the right spice, but like a thyme. It has that kind of, I even smelled Italian seasoning, because I thought it really almost comes from that kind of an herbally character. And I saw a review on a website where somebody was downgrading it because they said it has this funky smell, and I can't figure out what it is, and I've not smelled it in many other whiskeys. And if you're not prepared for it, it is initially something that you go, okay, whoa, that's different. What is that? I would say that what it is it reminds me of dried flowers. Again, going back to my youth, and my mother was doing dried cut flowers, and there's just this smell that surrounds. If you've been in a craft store, maybe you've smelled it, and it's this just very kind of dry, herbally smell. And so you pick up a little bit of that in this whiskey. Okay, and it's prevalent. So again, it's one of those things that once you get used to it, you're like, wow, okay, I like that. It's just a different character. But there's a sweet note on top, and maybe that's coming from the grain. It's probably coming from the corn. I don't nose as much of a rye influence in this. Okay, so you get a lot of the caramel, vanilla, but that herbal, especially as it starts getting towards the finish, just takes over. It becomes very strong in there. And you're getting some oak character in there as well. You may say 30 months of aging is just not enough to get oak influence, but you got to remember where this is being aged. And so it does pick up a pretty decent amount of that oak. I almost have like a little glue kind of a note there at the end as well. But this is a whiskey that if you like the flavor and you get into the flavor of it, I think you will enjoy it. But you got to be looking for that herbally note, because that herbally note is going to be pretty strong. The one thing I can definitely say about both of these whiskeys, they're very clean. And I think they'd be fantastic for cocktails because there's nothing off-putting in these in terms of tannins or those kinds of issues. Not a weird alcohol bite or anything like that. They don't really taste young. And so even though they are young, they are definitely being treated in that Texas weather like, just speed aging. Now this is the Outlaw bourbon, which comes with a nice little leather piece up here at the top and is got that little medallion embossed up at the top. Really, really nice presentation on these bottles. And so if you're going to present bottles, in my kitchen I have bottles lining the top of my cabinets, and this is one of the bottles that I would likely want to put up there because it's a pretty bottle. Okay, so now this one is 100% corn. This is aged, I think they used to age this under a year. Now they age it just over a year. And it is a, whoops, does it say? Yeah, it doesn't say a straight bourbon, but it does give the amount of time on the back of the bottle. And this really has, they age these in smaller barrels. And this really comes at you pretty strong with the oak. But it also comes at you with that herbal note. And it's very prevalent here. This was the one that I read the review on, and they said, weird note, what is that? And I gotta admit, first time I tasted it, I was like, wow, that's unique. I don't know that I've tasted anything like that. And maybe it comes from the type of yellow corn that they're using, where it's grown, how it's grown. So, oh man, and then it's like just this oak warehouse kind of a smell that comes in. Maybe there's a little vanilla in there. A little char comes in as well. Beautiful mouthfeel on this. Milky. I think what may, again, throw some people is it goes into that earthy, herbal, dried flower thing, and yet it has this milky character to it. You almost anticipate that it's going to be sweet, but for a corn whiskey, it is not really that sweet. It's really pleasant. And if you like that kind of dry taste towards the end, it's clean, it's buttery, but it's not aggressively sweet. It's almost like it's got rye in it, but it doesn't, because it comes at you with that herbliness. So it's a very, very interesting whiskey. And if you are trying to stretch your collection out and get some varying examples, I think this is a whiskey that stands in its own category and would be one that would be great for demonstrating how corn whiskey can be so different. Say, go to Ireland and get their single grain, or go to Japan and try Nika coffee grain, or go to Kentucky and try mellow corn. We're talking, 95 to 100% corn, and all of those whiskeys, all four of those whiskeys are very, very different from each other. One ingredient, but whether we call it terroir or whatever you want to refer to it as, aging, all the other variables that come in, corn whiskey does have the ability to be very different in different areas. But like I said, I think both of these are quality spirits. Don't let the age fool you. They are well matured for what they are, and that mouthfeel just gives it away that these are really well crafted whiskeys for what they are. So let's get back to the story of Santa Anna and Sam Houston. And what is the truth? What actually happened? Did this woman basically fool Santa Anna into having his forces attacked while he was playing between the sheets? Well, it's a fun story, but the reality is that before that 18-minute battle happened, and yes, it was just 18 minutes for the undersized Texas volunteers to come in and take out the Mexican army. The mistake wasn't hiding in a tent. Santa Anna was ready. There were skirmishes going on. They were well aware that Sam Houston was in the area. What happened was, most likely, is that Santa Anna was overconfident and he didn't pick the best place to put his troops. Put them out in the field. The river is kind of blocking any way for them to escape. And so it ended up being a rout. And what made it worse is that when the Mexicans began to retreat, and somehow this doesn't end up in the legend, as they started to retreat, the Americans, or the Texas soldiers, continued to fire on the Mexicans as they were leaving. Their sharpshooters and riflemen were out there just picking off anybody who was trying to escape. And the reason they were doing that was because of, remember the Alamo. And it was a moment of revenge. And Sam Houston tried to stop them as best he could, but the emotions were so high that they really couldn't stop him. So in the end, yes, this woman was traveling with Santa Anna, but likely as a prisoner, and whether they were having relations or not, she was not tricking him into having relations for the benefit of Sam Houston, because there was no communication between the two. She was a prisoner. How was she communicating back and forth with Sam Houston unless there were spies in the camp? So there's going to be things that we'll probably never be able to 100% answer, but this idea of Santa Anna hanging out in the tent while his troops are being mowed down, that's more fable than it is reality. She ended up going back to, she went to New York, I think, from what we understand. I thought that Yellow Rose of Texas was the Texas state song. It is not. It is Texas Our Texas, which is a song that became the state song in 1929. If you read the original lyrics for Yellow Rose of Texas, I think even in 1929 they were like, no, this is a little too racy for a state song. And so the lyrics were changed actually before it became a popular song in the 1950s. So anyway, that's my story of the Yellow Rose. That's my tasting of Yellow Rose whiskey. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have comments, if you've tried this whiskey, go ahead and leave some comments below. And if you love these kinds of stories, I'm actually now going to do a This Week podcast where I'm going to be talking about This Week in Whiskey Lore, that is on the Whiskey Lore, the Interviews podcast. So if you haven't subscribed to that yet and you listen to podcasts, you'll probably enjoy that, because they're going to be whiskey stories. They're going to be 5 minutes long, something to just kind of listen to and learn a little bit more about history and whiskey. Well, I hope you learned something good here, and until next time, cheers and Slán Java.